A study on the effects of violence in the media and television reveals a negative impact on adolescent viewers. This study concluded that children who consume high levels of media violence are more likely to be aggressive in the real world than opposed to children who don't engage in violent television and media. Researchers performed an experiment in which they randomly picked 24 children to watch television. Half of the 24 children watched a violent episode of the cartoon Woody Woodpecker, and the other 12 watched the non-violent cartoon The Little Red Hen. During play afterwards, the researchers observed that the children who watched the violent cartoon were getting much more physical with each other, breaking their toys, and being much more aggressive than the rest of the group who didn't watch the violent cartoon. They then went to the next level with the experiment and performed a new one. Professors studied the effects of exposure to real-world violence, television violence, and cartoon violence. They divided 100 preschool children into 4 groups. The first group watched a real person shout insults at an inflatable doll while hitting it with a mallet. The second group watched the incident on television. The third group watched a cartoon version of the same scene, and the fourth watched nothing. When all the children were later exposed to a frustrating situation, the first 3 groups responded with more aggression than the control group. The children who watched the incident on television were just as aggressive as those who had watched the real person use a mallet, and both were more aggressive than those who had only watched the cartoon. A number of surveys indicate that children and young people who report a preference for violent entertainment also score higher on aggression indexes than those who watch less violent shows. Raoul Huisman reviewed studies conducted in Australia, Finland, Poland, Israel, Netherlands, and the United States, and from his reports, he says the child most likely to be aggressive would be one who A. watches violent television programs most of the time, B. believes that these shows portray life just as it is, and C. identifies strongly with the aggressive characters in the shows. From these studies, you can conclude that when children get exposed to violent television media, it increases the chances that they themselves will become more violent in the real world. It is important that young age kids need to be taught the difference between what is socially acceptable and the difference between acting in the real world.